Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So we'll actually start with crypto today. Normally I start with Dixie, but crypto is we'll kind of do it in a different order. Let me label my notes. So daily discussion for 10 2023. Okay. So the long-awaited B-band squeeze has resolved itself, or seemingly resolved itself, right? We obviously need to wait for a close, but it looks pretty good so far, right? Let's go here. This should be a cleaner chart. What we've been looking for this whole time is either a pullback or a move to the upper B band. And let me get a cleaner chart altogether. Let's just do Bitstamp, whatever. And what we've been looking for is a move to this upper band. It's obviously been consolidating. You know, you can make an argument. I've had this like little diamond thing drawn on my chart for quite some time. And diamonds are basically just fancy symmetrical triangles, and they can either break up or break down. And the measured move for these things, the conservative measurement is you just take the low to the high. So it'd be at 26.90, and then you just project it upwards. So it would be something like this, you know. So we'd be targeting somewhere up here in the 31,000s, which makes sense. I mean, it's not terribly surprising. 31,000 is a logical level for a number of reasons, which we'll go into. But I want to stay focused on the B bands real quick. If you aren't exposed to Bitcoin yet, no big deal. All we want to see for a FOMO long is we just don't want to see this thing closing with a rejection of the upper band. So we don't want to see something like let me see if I can find an example. Something like this. Like, so let's say we go back in time. We go, okay, cool. It's closing right at the upper band. We don't want to see it doing something like this, where you see this rejection off the band. We want to see it. You know, I've been talking about this concept for a few weeks now of like attaching to the upper band. So we definitely don't want to see something like this. This would be at minimum concerning. But rather than, you know, something that rejects the top band, we want to see something that accepts the top band. So something more along the lines of this guy right here, where it has a very clean walk up to the band, and then bam, it just follows it until we get this detach up here. And it looks like that's what we're setting up now. So we saw Sunday close a really nice candle off of the midline. Still not actionable just yet by my strategy. This would be the actionable close. So we're looking to see how the daily candle closes. And if it closes, you know, anywhere around this upper band, as long as it's not full-blown rejection, this is a long signal. And so, you know, it's not financial advice, but the typical setup or the typical stop loss, especially if you're trading trading spot, I personally don't like to put stops on spot. Because it's such a high time frame, I'd rather just wait for I don't want to ride the volatility through it. I'd rather just wait to see how a candle closes. And so rather than putting a stop loss, we would say, okay, we'll just wait to see if the candle closes below this fella right here. Or, you know, if we see some significant red that brings us further inside the band, like here, for example, this would be, you know, a sign to maybe tighten our stops or at minimum, you know, reduce size. But you can see, even if you use this closing strategy, you would have been long this whole time, right? So like when we have this breakout up here, you stay long until the market closes below this fella, and it never closed below it. So even though it had all these wicks that went below it, it just never had that stop trigger, right? So you would have been long in the trade the whole time. So when I'm trading spot, I prefer to have manual stops. I'm looking for closes, not for volatility, because we all know how volatile crypto can be intraday, and we don't care about that. We care about the grand scheme of things going up, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and update our notes here. So I'm kind of doing this out of order, but I want to address this first. So daily B bands looks very promising, as we have the squeeze into B-band's expansion. squeeze. We'll write it like this: squeeze into B bands expansion. We want to see the daily closing with an acceptance of the upper band. Yeah, so basically what I just went into. And here's the squeeze, right? So we see the squeeze coming in, boom, and we see this really clean expansion of the bands, which says consolidation over. The reason why we don't want to see a rejection off the upper band is because this is, on some occasions, this can be a fake out. And so if we see weakness off the upper band, we want to be mindful of where it closes next. But we shouldn't just assume a fake out, right? We want to have objective stops. And when we see this expansion of the bands here, this says consolidation over, new trend begin, right? So I'll add that. Squeeze, B-band squeeze into, I know there's like I forget what John Bollinger calls it. There's like an actual formal name that he calls it when the bands expand, but we'll just say into band expansion says consolidation over, new trend begins. And we were consolidated for a long time. Like we were in this thing for basically a month, right? Was it a month? It was like 3 weeks. 3 weeks pretty much. But that's a long consolidation. It's one of the longer ones we've had in a while. We had this guy right here, but this was like exceptionally flat. And we see that represented on the weekly candles. So if we go to the weekly candles, just like look at all these dojis. This is the most amount of back-to-back dojis we've seen, basically since I think it was like 2016 was the last time we saw that many weekly dojis in a row. So this is like pretty rare that the market does this, where it just like comes up and just dojis sideways. But if we can get a move back up to the B bands on the weekly, this thing's still got some juice left in it, right? So if we can get a move up to here on the weekly, basically by next Sunday, that would signal a weekly continuation. So something like, I'm not saying it's going to be like this, but you can see, once we get a weekly close on the B bands and we get the attach, it rides upward. Here's an example again. Of course, we have just a ton of examples like this, right? So, the day of reckoning will come for the late bulls, where we do see a profound pullback that really gut checks everyone. But right now, the charts don't really say that that's what's in store, right? Obviously, we need to wait 6 more days to see where the B bands close, or where the daily, to see where the weekly candle closes. But the daily is promising, and the daily will tease what the weekly is going to do next, right? Daily closes before the weekly. Sorry, guys. Sneezing. It's pollen season over here. What else we want to say? Okay, so entry signal would be a daily close that accepts or attaches to the upper band with a stop below. I don't know if there's a formal name for this. We'll go ahead and trademark it right now. Below the I'll say the attachment candle. And the attachment candle is this guy. So it'll be the candle that gets us velcroed to the upper band. So in this case, it would be this guy. If we look at bearish examples, it would be this fella, right? This guy. And yeah, you guys get the idea, right? With a stop below, I'll say stop triggered by a daily close below the attachment candle. And we'll say this is BTC. Could this pump be the UTAD? Yeah, it totally could. So that's why I'm saying we want to keep an eye out for it and a rejection of the upper band. A rejection of the upper band would be an indication that we just took out a bunch of stops. You don't see it here because this is by Bitstamp. It didn't take out the prior high, but if we look at things like Coinbase, not Coinbase, Jesus, my brain is all over the place. Coinbase took out the prior high, right? Very different chart than Bitstamp. You see, it took out the prior high. If we reject here, and we get a candle that closes down in here, that would not be a long signal by my standards. That would be actually very alarming because we actually took out the high and then retraced 50%. But as long, even if we take out the high and we don't just full blown retrace, as long as we get a close that's like within striking distance of this B band, that's totally fine by me. Nothing terribly alarming there. But yes, you're totally right. Like it could ultimately yield. So if we're looking at this thing like this on lower time frames, for those who don't know, what he's basically asking, or she, I don't know what you are, but basically asking, could this be further distribution signs? A really big sign that this is distribution is if we start getting like 4-hour closes back inside the trading range, that would be a big sign, a hint of what's to come. But yeah, I mean, so far, we should never just, whenever we see a breakout, especially if we're in an uptrend, we should never just assume that it's going to be a fake out, right? The assumption is that's going to keep going. And then the onus is on the bears to show their hand, right? The momentum is in the direction of the bulls, right? So, okay. Yeah, so let's take a look at some of the, what do we want to call it? The peripheral markets for Bitcoin. So GBTC for one. So GBTC had a C clamp. It no longer has that. So if we saw it the close of last week, it had this perfect C clamp. Which again, we don't just short this in hopes that it's going to mean revert. Really what we should be looking for is we should be looking for a close below this, and it never got it, right? So if we fast forward, we see that the Kijun is pulling up, and then the C clamp just resolved itself. It's gone. It's the overbought condition is no longer there, and this is now just looking like a really healthy uptrend, right? Which is great because if we look at the weekly cloud, it's about to close inside it. So as long as this thing doesn't just, nuke, this is set up for success. So if we get a weekly close inside this cloud, we get the edge to edge set up, and we'll take it from there. But at minimum, it's going to say, hey, we have more upside. So I'll add GBTC. Daily C clamp is now invalid, and we are now looking for a trend continuation. Weekly cloud shows potential for an edge to edge play pending a close inside the cloud. And what is that value? That value is basically essentially 16.9, we'll say. Cloud close equals $16.9. So as long as it closes above 16.9, this thing's setting up an edge to edge. And that'll close on Friday, right? Because this is GBTC. It's only traded during the week, so this only has 4 days left on it. And then let's also take a look at CME futures. Can we look at Ether later? Want to see the charts are showing compared to? Yeah, I've never done a stream where I did not look at Ether. I just always start with either Bitcoin or the dollar index, but we're definitely going to cover Ether. Don't you worry. CME futures. I'll say CME Bitcoin futures. On CME futures, there's quite a few things that are interesting. It still has the C-clamp-ish thing. Now, this might prove to resolve itself. Like maybe if it closes up here tomorrow and it keeps going up, this thing's just going to pull up, right? But right now, we do need to keep an eye on this because if we reject this high, let's say worst case scenario, just to play devil's advocate here, this thing rejects this high right here. We would look for a close below this Tenkan and target the Kijun, right? So technically, the C clamp is still on the table, but as long as we close somewhere up here, it'll be invalidated by the open of the next day. But technically, it is still on the table. So let's go ahead and just write that down just to keep kosher, right? So daily C clamp is technically still on the table, but if we close anywhere near these values, the daily Kijun will climb and it will invalidate the setup. Okay. The other thing I want to point out is on the weekly chart, we're still good to go on this edge to edge. It never closed back outside. It's just kind of taking a little bit longer, which in my opinion, if you want to be super bullish, if as long as we don't, the slower the move up is actually better. Because if we go too fast, we're going to run into this resistance and probably come back down. But if we do something like this is actually the best case scenario for a prolonged uptrend, something that lasts, a handful of months rather than just like a handful of weeks. So if we keep going up like this is actually better. This is better than just a flash in the pan that comes crashing down. So if we keep going up like this, we'll eventually just break out of the side of this cloud. All that to say, weekly edge to edge is still in play. Smiley. Okay. Now, when we look at the B band, same thing that I said with spot applies here. We want to see this thing attaching up here. And so you're probably asking yourself, like, why am I even talking about all this other shit? We're stacking clues, right? This is how I always teach this stuff. It's like we should be thinking of ourselves as like little detectives, right? And the more things we can stack on our corner to say, yes, this is a bullish bias. Yes, this is a bullish bias. The more things we can pile up, the more confidence we can have in the trend, and the less likely you are to get shaken out or spooked on pullbacks and things like that. And it just kind of helps you sleep better at night if you're in a long position, right? So if we get a weekly close on this upper band, cool, check. Bull column, ready to keep going upward, right? The one thing I do want to point out on the daily, so the daily consolidation, daily B band and Ichimoku both indicate a move down. No, that's not right. The daily B band for CME futures, it has the potential to set up a reversal pattern called a 3 pushes to a high. If we get a massive rejection off of this high. This is why it's really important to wait until it closes before you trade. If we get a close, so here's a really good example of why you should have %B and BBW with your chart. If we get a close, so right now, here are the 3 pushes to a high. So here's a high, high, high. the way you use this with Bollinger Bands is you then go down, you say, okay, here are my 3 highs. How do they correlate on my percent B? We see high, come down here, we go high. And if this thing closes a lower high, so something below here, like if we get really zoomed in here, and we take our, like a little bit of a horizontal here. If we get a close below here, this would then set up a 3 pushes to a high, which is a reversal pattern. It's essentially like you went like this, boom, boom, and then bam. You've probably seen this sort of structure like this a million times in crypto. This is just the Bollinger Band variant of that. Now, as long as we close up here, then 3 pushes to a high is off the table. But just throwing this out there, in case we do see profound selling for whatever reason, then it, it has the potential to set up a 3 pushes to a high. But right now, totally fine. Looks good. All right, I got a bunch of messages here. Let's look at them. I have missed the 20K, 25K, and 27K buy-in. I don't want to say I've missed 29K again. Should we wait for the drop to buy some? Yeah, so I actually addressed this already, and I have it in the show notes. Yeah, all this stuff has already been covered. I would suggest just rewinding it so I don't have to cover it all again, or going to my Discord and catching the show notes there. I post all the little notes that I keep track of during the stream. I post them in my Discord, and they're available for free. So if you want the link to the Discord, bam, there you go. Can you switch to 1 hour candle, please? Oh my God, this is a word soup. Okay, let me see this. Can you switch to 1 hour candle, please? In 1 hour time frame, 29,290 is high, left, lower high, and if the right candle closed below the high, that makes... Okay, I'm not going to answer that. That sounds like you're asking for specific trade advice, and I'm not going to do that. So we have a replay. Yeah. So I also, in the Discord, I also post the recordings of the streams there. So it's the one-stop shop for all this stuff. Okay. Kind of got derailed here. What was I saying? Edge to edge still in play. Let's say note, in the event of profound selling, watch for the daily B bands. I'll put this in quotation marks. 3 pushes to a high. Setup. This will be signaled by the 3rd high, making a lower 3rd high on the percent B. This is for all the B bands nerds out there. I'm a big fan of B bands. I love that indicator. It's such a good indicator. Okay. All right. Any questions about the Bitcoin stuff? I mean, I'm not specifically asking for short. If a swing high is made, what would you do in that case? It made a swing high already. What do you mean? This is a swing high. I literally laid out what I'm going to do right here. I worded it. Entry signal would be a daily close that attaches to the upper CB band. Yeah, I mean, so shorting a breakout like this is basically like flipping a coin. It's like flipping a four-sided coin. Imagine a world where we can have four-sided coins, right? Um, Imagine a world where we have a four-sided coin, right? Jay Riddy, you almost triggered me so hard. I read that mid-sentence, and you asked me if I was going to go over Bitcoin. I was like, I'm gonna fucking lose it. But imagine, like, so shorting right now, this is basically like imagine a world where four-sided coins exist, right? And three out of the four coins, or three out of the four sides, is heads. And for whatever reason, you want to bet on tails. Now, there's a chance you're right, but the odds aren't in your favor to bet on heads, right? It's a 75% chance it's going to be tails. That's basically what's happening right now. Like, maybe you'll be right, but play the trend, right? Like, play all the odds that are in your favor. Dude, I'm new in the space. I'm learning things. I got curious, so I asked. What's so funny here? I don't think anyone's making fun of you. Literally just saying, if the trend is up, don't, like, the odds that you are somehow going to time the exact top of this thing are very, very low, right? So rather than trying to wager that you have caught the exact high of the market, play the odds. The odds are in your favor that they're going to go up. Can you look at the same Coinbase one-day chart, then see Ichimoku and B bands for what I was referring to earlier? Yeah. How does a confluence